The winter of 1878 did not arrive gently. It came with a wind that carved through timber walls and turned cattle breath into silver ghosts in the air. Across the Territorial plains, snow erased fences, buried trails, and swallowed entire homesteads without mercy. In the lawless expanse of the American territories, order was fragile, survival uncertain, and the written code of expansion was absolute. Territorial law demanded that disputed land be vacated immediately upon official notice. No delays. No weather exemptions. No mercy clauses. The statute was clear. Property was priority. Expansion was destiny. Human hardship was irrelevant. But what happens when the law becomes a death sentence? This is Western Tales Official, where we uncover the forgotten truths of frontier history and examine the moments when ordinary people were forced to confront extraordinary moral choices. If stories of real Western courage and hard decisions matter to you, subscribe now and become part of a community that values history beyond the myth. Our story begins with a rancher named Elias Whitaker, a man known not for rebellion, but for discipline. He was not a bandit, not a radical, not a dreamer. He was a cattleman who believed in structure. He respected territorial authority because order meant stability, and stability meant survival. But stability on the frontier was always an illusion. One afternoon, as the sky threatened another blizzard, a wagon approached his ranch. Inside were a mother, 2 children, and a man too weak to stand. Their claim to a nearby parcel had been voided after a clerical dispute over registration timing. The Territorial office, located hundreds of miles away, had declared their homestead invalid. Under statute, they were squatters. Under the weather, they were condemned. Would you turn them away? Territorial law required immediate evacuation. The eviction document carried an official seal and a warning. Any citizen found harboring displaced claimants could be charged with obstruction and risk forfeiture of their own land rights. Elias read the notice twice. The words were not cruel in tone. They were neutral, efficient, procedural, and deadly. The children were shivering. In that moment, the frontier revealed its true dilemma. The code of the West was clear, but survival demanded something else. Territorial law was not written for winter storms. It was written for maps. Its architects were legislators seated in distant capitals, drafting policies designed to accelerate settlement and secure federal authority over vast landscapes. Speed mattered more than nuance. Uniformity mattered more than circumstance. The law was engineered to prevent land disputes, not to safeguard human life during catastrophic weather. Bureaucratic mandates left no room for interpretation. Local officials were stripped of discretionary power. A sheriff could enforce eviction, but he could not postpone it. A clerk could invalidate a claim, but could not restore it without months of review. Appeals required travel impossible during winter conditions. In theory, there was process. In practice, there was exposure. The family that arrived at Elias Whitaker's ranch had lost their claim because paperwork reached the Territorial office 2 days late. 2 days. On the plains, mail delivery depended on horseback routes vulnerable to storms. Yet the statute recognized no environmental delay. This was the fundamental flaw of territorial governance. It assumed geography without respecting climate. It assumed compliance without considering survival. Elias understood the system. He had benefited from it. His ranch existed because expansion law granted opportunity. But now he saw its blind spot. The statute demanded vacancy of a cabin buried in snowdrifts taller than a man. It demanded relocation across miles of frozen prairie without shelter. It demanded adherence without offering protection. At what point does obedience become participation in harm? The children's boots were soaked. The mother's hands were cracked and bleeding. The father's cough carried the hollow sound of pneumonia. Elias faced a calculation no ledger could contain. If he obeyed, he preserved his legal standing. If he defied, He risked everything he built. The government called it enforcement. The weather called it execution. Elias made his choice before sunset. He opened his barn, cleared space near the livestock heaters, and instructed his ranch hands to prepare broth. He did not announce rebellion. He did not draft a manifesto. He simply refused to let a family freeze. He understood the consequences. Harboring displaced claimants could be interpreted as aiding unlawful occupancy. Territorial inspectors were known to make examples of dissenters. Land titles could be reviewed. Grazing permits could be suspended. Credit lines with supply merchants could disappear overnight. On the frontier, reputation was currency, and defiance carried cost. Yet something unexpected happened. Neighbors noticed smoke from Elias's secondary chimney. Word traveled through trading posts and church gatherings. A rancher had chosen compassion over compliance. Some called him reckless. Others called him honorable. Quietly, several families began leaving sacks of flour and dried beans near his gate. Community law, sometimes called neighbor law, began asserting itself. This informal moral code had always existed beneath territorial authority. It operated through shared hardship rather than sealed documents. It valued reciprocity over regulation. And in winter, it prioritized warmth over ownership disputes. The sheltered family regained strength slowly. The children began helping with chores. The mother stitched torn blankets. The father, once he could stand, insisted on repairing fence lines as repayment. Elias refused formal compensation. He told them survival was not a transaction. He told them survival was not a transaction. But the sheriff had received notice. When the territorial authorities arrived, they came on horseback with documents secured in oilskin to protect against snow. The sheriff was not an enemy. He was a man with obligations. His orders were explicit. Enforce eviction compliance. Investigate obstruction. He read the statute aloud in Elias's yard, his voice steady against the wind. The language spoke of property integrity, orderly settlement, and the necessity of uniform enforcement. It did not mention children. It did not mention blizzards. It did not mention mortality rates. Inside the barn, warmth radiated from iron stoves. The contrast was undeniable. Elias did not deny his actions. He stated plainly that a law guaranteeing death in its execution violated the purpose of governance. Authority exists to preserve life and order. If preserving order destroys life, then order has been misdefined. The sheriff hesitated. Enforcement was his duty. But discretion, though technically removed, still lived in human judgment. A standoff followed. Not of gunfire, but of interpretation. The sheriff could escalate to territorial marshals. He could file charges. Or he could delay reporting until weather conditions improved. History rarely records hesitation. Yet hesitation changes outcomes. The sheriff chose to wait. The storm broke weeks later. Roads reopened, appeals were filed. Public awareness of the incident spread through regional newspapers. The narrative was simple and powerful. A rancher risked his land to prevent winter deaths caused by rigid eviction statutes. Debate followed. Legislators faced scrutiny. Editorials questioned whether expansion policies had outpaced ethical responsibility. Over time, modest amendments emerged. Emergency weather exemptions were introduced in certain territories. Local officials regained limited postponement authority during declared environmental crises. The law evolved not because of rebellion alone, but because defiance exposed its weakness. Elias Whitaker did not become a legend in dime novels. He did not seek fame. His ranch survived. The family he sheltered eventually secured a new claim legally recognized the following spring. But something more enduring remained. Proof that centralized systems require local conscience to function justly. What would you have done in his place? Would you protect your security or risk it for strangers? When institutions fail, does morality transfer to individuals? Frontier history teaches a difficult lesson. Written law provides structure, but humanity provides legitimacy. Without compassion, governance becomes machinery. With conscience, even defiance can strengthen justice. This is Western Tales Official, where we revisit the turning points that shaped the West beyond myth and gunfire. If you value stories that challenge assumptions and reveal the human core of history, subscribe now and join us for the next untold chapter. Because sometimes the most important battles were not fought with bullets, but with choices.